This is the saga of Egill Skallagrímsson, the son of Skallagrímur Kveld-Úlfsson and Bera Ingvarsdóttir. He was born somewhere between the years 850 and 1000 CE. Egill is one of Iceland's biggest historical figures. A poet, a warrior, a viciously hot-headed and really ugly man. Egill took his first steps towards greatness at the ripe old age of 3 years old when he wrote a poem after stealing a horse to go to a party his father refused to take him to because he was a boring child. When Egill was 7, he took his next step towards being a man. Some kid hurt him and Egill, blinded with rage, borrowed a halberd and split his skull in twain. His father didn't care, but his mother saw some good Viking potential in him. A few years later, when Egill was 12, his father Skallagrímur had murdered Egill's best friend and his favorite slave, so Egill naturally murdered his dad's best friend in return. The year after, Egill cut the mooring of his brother's ship and told him he would keep doing it until he could come with him to Norway. In Norway, Egill was invited to a feast where the host, Bárður, not only insulted him, but also poisoned his drink. So of course Egill had to slaughter him. But Bárður was the retainer of the soon-to-be king Eiríkur Haraldsson, or Eiríkur Bloodaxe, as he was also known. As you can imagine, a guy named Bloodaxe was not particularly happy with his retainer being casually slaughtered. He sent his wife's brothers after Egill, but Egill killed them first. The following spring, Egill and his brother Þorólfur got themselves a big-ass warship and went east pillaging. While Egill and his brother were joyfully plundering away, they were captured and imprisoned by a wealthy and powerful man. Egill easily broke them loose and snatched his gold, but halfway back to his ship, he decided it was not honorable for him to act like a common thief, but that a righteous man should stand by his misdeeds. So he marched back to the house and set it on fire. When the owner of the home came out, he asked who did this. Egill told him his name, and gave him a speech about hospitality before chopping his head off. A true man of honor. After a pit stop in Norway, Egill and his brother travelled to Britain and joined King Athelstan to fight against the Scots. After slaughtering hundreds of men, his brother was killed in an ambush, leaving Egill to do the only sensible thing he could. He married his brother's widow. So Egill and his new wife moved to Iceland and lived there for a while until her father died and he discovered that his brother's widow's half-sister's husband, Berg-Önung, had stolen their inheritance. Instead of consoling his wife, Egill rushed to Norway and sued him. He took his case to the Viking court, where he learned that Eiríkur Bloodaxe had been crowned king and was not thrilled to see him. So naturally, the king threw his case out and exiled him. Egill made a quick escape, dodging the king's men, led by his son Rögnvaldur, and hid. But he wasn't going to just take that. Egill went back to his brother's widow's half-sister's husband and murdered him and his friends. On his way back home, he met the king's son again, killed him for good measure, and took the time to erect a nifstone against the king and queen of Norway. Side note, a nifstone is the Viking equivalent of giving someone the middle finger. Just plop a horse's head on a stick, decorated with runes, and plant it into the ground to curse whomever. So Egill went back to Iceland and lived there for a while, until King Eiríkur's queen cursed him to become restless as a weird form of revenge. Growing ever crankier, Egill decided to go on another journey and went out sailing again. He was shipwrecked in Britain, where he met his friend Arinbjörn, who just so happened to live there. Together, they took up arms and marched to the court of Eiríkur Bloodaxe, which for some reason was in Britain now. Arinbjörn told Egill to say sorry to the sovereign and that he would back him up, but Eiríkur Bloodaxe just didn't care. He wanted that monstrously ugly barbarian of a poet killed. While waiting to be killed, Egill was told by Arinbjörn to compose a poem to praise the king, and that maybe he would forgive him. And forgive him he did. Egill had a bunch of small adventures after this. He fought the unfortunately yet accurately named berserker Ugly the Pale. He duelled his brother's widow's half-sister's husband's little brother, the aptly named Atli the Little, and celebrated Yuletide with his friend Arinbjörn. But ultimately his story was coming to an end. Egill returned to Iceland, he had 5 children with his wife, and engaged in politics, until he went both deaf and blind, and finally died at the tender age of 80. But not before getting in one last murder. He ordered his servant to help him bury his treasure and then crushed his head once he was done. And thus concludes the saga of Egill Skallagrímsson, a poet, a warrior, a viciously hot-headed and really ugly man.